So let's paint a picture of the context of the world that we're living in, which is that our world has changed. That might be the understatement of the year, but the last 16 months has thrown so many different stressors. Change is stress. And so we have gone through so much change, so much stress globally, collectively together, right? This pandemic that we've been living through has absolutely created, we are ripe for burnout. Constantly, we're changing the way that we work, we're changing the way our relationships are, we're changing the way that we interact with other people, with our home life, our personal life, what that means for working from home and living at work. Also, for some folks, with the racial injustices and the reckoning that our world has experienced last year, maybe for some, really just even understanding, like, what does that mean for me and my role? What does that mean for my journey and my social consciousness? What does that mean for my role in my relationships, my role in my company when it comes to equity and diversity and inclusion? So this is just even collectively setting the landscape of all the different types of changes and all the different types of ingredients they're adding to a setting and environment that's ripe for burnout. And maybe 16 months ago, we had the extra reserves that we could have dipped into to meet the times of a crisis. But after 16 months, we've completely depleted our surge capacity, right? We're dried up. We haven't had a chance to replenish. And so these feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, fear, and grief are absolutely common right now. I can't emphasize that enough. We're not alone. You're seeing that in the chat, but that is very common. And what that can look like is our emotional resilience gone, right? Our ability to regulate our emotions worn thin. We're getting angry and frustrated and immediately suddenly sad at the drop of a hat that we didn't have before. That picture of Michelle Obama in the middle, she talks about kind of having this low grade depression, right? You may have heard the term languishing from a New York Times article, just this malaise and this mental fog. So everything feels really dampened. And then who do we take it out on, right? We take it out on our people that we love, the people that are closest to us, the people that we're seeing constantly, our co-founders, our close colleagues, our friends, our family, our children. And then we feel guilty about it, and round and around we go in this vicious cycle. And this isn't just something that's in our heads that we just need to like shake out of it. Just like, okay, if I just, grit with sheer grit, I'll get through it. There are some real impacts to you and to your teams. The average workday has increased by 3 hours since March of last year, right? 40% and more are saying that they've experienced burnout during the pandemic. And that's from July of last year. I'm willing to bet that that number is higher now that we're 16 months into the pandemic. 42% are saying that they're experiencing very high levels of stress. 67% of those working remotely feel pressure to be available at all hours of the day. So that there's that concept of not only working from home, but feeling like you're living at work. All the boundaries are being blurred, right? You don't know when your work life ends and your personal life begins. They're all together. 65% are admitting to working longer hours than ever before. And then there's actual physical tolls, right? I looked these up because I was curious for myself, because I definitely am experiencing these TMJ symptoms, grinding your teeth, chipped tooth, TMD, right? 34% increase, almost 70% report sleep pattern changes. And that's on both sides, whether you have trouble sleeping and or find yourself constantly physically exhausted, so you're sleeping more. And then this last piece, I just wanted to throw this in here, is that in this same poll of 2,000 Americans, is that 56% say having flexibility in their workplace is the top way that their managers and their companies and workplace can offer support. So feeling like you have some sense of control and flexibility in your time and in your schedule. So there are real physical, mental, emotional impacts that this stew that we've been living in has really had on you and as a people leader, to your teams and to your organization. So then, is what you're feeling actually burnout? Let's talk about what actually burnout is in terms of the definition. So burnout refers to a collection of different physical, emotional, and mental reactions that occur in response to prolonged stress and overworking. So the key words here is that it's prolonged and chronic stress. And as of 2019, May of 2019, the World Health Organization identifies and recognizes burnout as a medical diagnosis. So there are three kind of key characteristics and defining symptoms of burnout. The first is exhaustion, mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion. You wake up, you're tired, you feel completely depleted. Your immune system is actually down. You find yourself being more sick more often. Your body is breaking down, as Eric mentioned. You know, he slept until 4 o'clock. He was actually physically, his body was aching. You are 63% more likely to take a sick day if you are burnt out versus someone who is not burnt out. So there's actual real physical implications, emotional and mental, of burnout. The second is the sense of lack of accomplishment or inefficacy, right? Not only are things actually slipping through the cracks, the work that you used to be able to do now feels really tiring. You're feeling isolated and hopeless and helpless, and things are actually, you are slipping in terms of performance. And then the last piece is this cynicism or depersonalization, right? You're finding yourself to be more pessimistic, you're more brusque, you're more cynical about the work that you do. Well, what's the point, right? What is the point of doing that? And you find yourself doing that. And not only for yourself, these are important for you to understand for yourself, but also in recognizing this in your team members and in your employees. Are your employees starting to not show up? They're coming later and later. They're taking more sick days. You're finding themselves being more cynical about projects that they're now responsible for. These are clear signs and symptoms of burnout. I do want to kind of identify the difference between stress and burnout, because I think that there's sometimes this fine line. As you know, burnout is due to prolonged and chronic stress, right? So they are on the same sides of the coin. But where stress is feeling like you're completely overengaged, overreactive, there's this sense of urgency and hyperactivity. You feel like you're drowning in responsibilities, and maybe you have a loss of energy because of that hyperactivity and urgency. That can lead to feelings of anxiousness and anxiety disorder. So if stress is really feeling like you're overwhelmed and you're drowning, your thoughts are racing 1,000 miles per hour, then burnout is actually on the other side, where you are completely depleted, right? It's characterized, you're used up, you're dried up, you're driving on fumes. It's characterized by disengagement. Your emotions are actually blunted. You feel helpless and hopeless. There's these fantasies of escaping, both in the work, but also in life. Loss of motivation, ideals, and hope. And that can really lead to detachment and depression. And it is really important for me to note here that I am not a medical professional. So if there are things where you are starting to feel completely hopeless, when there's this desire to escape, I do encourage you to please speak to your medical professional. So with stress, often people who are really stressed out, they can think about, okay, if I remove the source of my stress, I probably would feel better. For someone who's burnt out, it's hard for them to even imagine if the source of their stress were removed, if they would feel better. It's harder for them to even acknowledge that they are indeed in the state of burnout.